Folks, it's George from Angels Walking With Us. I'm super excited today because I have a special guest with me, Michelle Miller from the Central Massachusetts Lyme Foundation. They're a nonprofit group based in Massachusetts, and I wanted Michelle to tell you why she came to this point with her co-founder, her husband, Ken Miller, and what they do to help the community of those who are suffering. Hey, Michelle, welcome to Angels Walking With Us.
Hi, George. Thank you so much for having me today.
My pleasure. Michelle, we've known each other a long time. You've done so much good for folks, educating them, giving them awareness around this devastating disease. Can you please take us back briefly on how you started this foundation, what the genesis of this foundation was, and why you're doing what you do today?
Well, in 2004, I lost my dad to complications from diabetes. And my mother, they were high school sweethearts. He was the love of her life. And as you know, the death of a spouse can be very stressful. And through that passing, my mom started to have various symptoms: vertigo, heart palpitations, just high anxiety. And she was going to the doctor saying it was all stress related from the loss of my dad, and just prescribing medication. After looking at my mother's medication list, George, she was probably on 19 prescriptions for various ailments throughout the year. And those lists I found in her home after she passed away. But in 2011, my mother got the diagnosis of ALS. You know, George, it's Lou Gehrig's disease. They're pretty much given a death sentence, 2 to 3 years. And that doctor did not do a blood test of any kind. And, we're finding out that ALS, there is no definitive test. Right?
So what you're saying is there was never a further investigation into your mother's case regarding the symptoms she was experiencing, which was what, please?
It was ALS. I remember the appointment with my mother and my brother. He handed my mother an ALS manual and told my brother and I there were ALS support groups in the area, and that was that. But fortunately, George, you and I wouldn't be talking today if my mother accepted that diagnosis. And she kept on thinking, this can't be right. There's got to be more to this. And thank God she knew enough to seek out another opinion. And that's when we found a holistic doctor who we didn't know at the time was very Lyme literate. And that 3-hour appointment, George, he looked at my mother's symptoms, looked in chronological order of what happened to my dad, all the symptoms that she was experiencing. And he said, forgive those doctors, but I believe you have late stage Lyme disease, and I am going to do the proper blood test to determine that. And, I remember my mother being angry because the test that she had to have done wasn't covered by insurance. Now, this test, George, is covered by Medicare. So my mother must be happy as can be to hear that, because she was not happy that she had to pay over $1,000 for that test to really get the answers that she needed.
And we know now that so many of the patients that we talk to, the ones I speak to all over the world, the ones that come to you through your foundation, many of them have paid tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars out of their pocket. And from my interactions at your foundation and speaking, that I've spent over $400,000 out of pocket just to get to this point and survive, because the insurance companies will not recognize A, the disease, and B, will not pay for any of those therapeutics.
Correct. So 3 weeks later, we went back to that physician and she got the diagnosis of Lyme disease. The doctor wanted her to do IV antibiotics. She, at that time, was too weak, and she did end up passing away from the complications, which I believe the Herxheimer reaction from the starting of the treatment. Just really, she was too weak at that point. And after her passing, I remember that Mother's Day, George, I curled up on the couch. My husband, Ken, had, set up a nice brunch with my children, and I was not in a good place. And I needed counseling. That's when I really realized I needed counseling for this. And my counselor was a blessing to me because she made me realize that I am a mother too, and I have children who I need to live for, even though I lost my own. And she said, "You're at a fork in the road, Michelle. You can be bitter the rest of your life, or you can be better. And what would your mom want you to do?"
Tell me, yeah, right. So tell me, please, just for a moment, tell me how dark that space was and how sad you were that the medical community could not or was somewhat dismissive of your mother.
Do you know, George, we went back, my mother and I, with that test to her neurologist, and he wouldn't even look at it. He threw it across the desk and said, "I already diagnosed you with ALS." And he wasn't admitting to even considering that it could be Lyme disease.
That must have been extremely hard for you as both a daughter and as an observer to see that
Right.
and feel that rejection that so many chronically ill patients feel.
And I hear it all the time, George, how, people will go to their doctor and they'll call me saying, "Michelle, they don't believe this test, or they don't want to test me for Lyme disease, or they don't want to treat me for Lyme disease." And I tell them, then you need to find somebody who will, because this is your body, this is your health.
So after that Mother's Day, and I can only imagine how you felt that day, what was your go forward action? What were your thoughts as you went through this process of grieving for your mom, going through that day? What happened? What sparked in you?
Cleaning out her house, George, and finding notebooks, not only in her nightstand, in her hutch, a TV stand, all notebooks through the years of her symptoms. She was sick for a very, very long time and didn't want to burden me or my brother with any of the symptoms that she was experiencing. So I said to my husband, how many people are suffering in silence with this disease and not having anyone to turn to? And that's when I created a Facebook group in the local area, went to the local library and asked if I could have a support group meeting there in October 2013. So that was the same year that my mother passed away. I told my husband, "I don't know how many are going to show up, but I will be there from 6 to 8 and we'll see what happens." And we had 23 people show up. They were all sharing their stories. And I just knew we had to proceed with trying to help this area just educate about how serious this is. Chronic Lyme disease does exist.
Well, I know it because you know from my book, Angels Walking With Us, and
Yes.
from our interaction,
Mhm.
the suffering and pain that me, representative of so many, have gone through. I'm very fortunate because I've had resources available to me, gone
Mhm.
to Germany 3 times, as you know, and all the other things that go along with my story. But there's so many other stories like mine in parallel. And it's amazing, and you know this, when I get to a conference and speak, or when somebody reads Angels Walking With Us, they say, That's my story. I have the same exact story. So going back to your mom and her the rejective attitude of her physician, that plays itself out, as you mentioned earlier, with so many patients.
My mother was definitely working upstairs because after that first meeting, George, I connected with you. You came into my life. I heard about your book through somebody else. And I think I just went to your website and I called and you picked up the phone. And we had an instant connection. I feel that we have a strong bond, and we've always had you speak at our meetings, at our conferences that we've had, because your presentation, George, applies not only to people with Lyme disease, but I believe battling anything in life that they may have.
I appreciate those words, because the target for that is, when you have your conferences and you have that beautiful annual conference that you've had for many years, where you invite physicians and you invite folks from the testing side, folks that offer remedies, folks from all aspects of disease management. There isn't anybody that really talks about the emotional side of illness.
No.
And isn't it interesting that your mom, all of these symptoms presented after your dad had passed? So we know from Dr. Cowden, who's my personal physician and friend.
Yes.
Many folks on this channel will know him from the Cowden protocol, and other doctors who understand the value of emotions and illness.
Yeah.
I really like to share from my book, Angels Walking With Us, is the story of one of the physicians that I see today. He's my primary physician. He had a 17-year-old girl who had leukemia. He treated her with oncology drugs, and at the age of 20, she was deemed in remission. So being in this state, she married quite young at age 20 and decided to start a family. She was married for 20 years. At age 40, her husband said, "I don't want to be married to you anymore." And wouldn't you know it, the cancer came back with a vengeance on her. And they had a really difficult time. They were able to recover. She was able to go back into remission after years of therapy. But it happened at that trigger point with that emotion of being rejected from her husband.
Yep.
So we know many physicians and research doctors understand. But tell me about what your plans are now and in the future, and where you're going with this.
Okay. Well, we did receive a grant, George, from the Lyme Disease Association to continue our Lyme Library campaign. I don't know if you remember, a couple years ago, we included your book in the Lyme library kits that we were distributing to pretty much all the public libraries in our area. But there were some areas out in the western part of the state that we weren't able to distribute, and the Lyme Disease Association gave us funding for us to continue that.
Michelle, if somebody wanted to learn more about your group, what tools do you have to offer through your website, or what platforms do you offer from your group that could help somebody that's searching just like you and your mom were back in those days?
Right. Well, that's why we have our Lyme library kits, because when we went to my mother's library, George, they had one book and it was from the 1970s. So that's why distributing books to the libraries was important for me. And we have a toll-free Lyme line, which, we fund that through really volunteers who just donate because they know how important it is for us to keep that toll-free Lyme line open. And believe me, we get calls, George, throughout the year. January, February, it doesn't matter. People still need help. And we have our website. There are some resources on that website.
This ability for you to help others in memory of your mother, and you feeling firsthand that pain and suffering of that loss, and possibly having a different outcome if you were able to intervene sooner is really powerful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put down below in the links, right below me, the links to your website for your foundation and any other information that you are willing to convey to those that need help. I know you don't turn anybody away and you're always there
No.
to answer those questions. So what we'll do is make sure that we have that available at the bottom of this video. And I'd like everybody please to hit the subscribe button and the little bell right down there, so you're notified every time we have a new guest just like Michelle that can help you and maybe somebody you know, somebody that you've come in contact with, a neighbor, a loved one. That's what this is about. And I really appreciate you coming on today, Michelle, to share your story and to tell us a little bit about your foundation.
Thank you so much, George, for giving me this opportunity. When I got the call last week, I started to break down because this is an important story to share.
Michelle Miller, Central Massachusetts Lyme Foundation. It was my honor and privilege to interview you today. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
God bless you too, George. Thank you.